The Tibetan Book of the Dead. Natural liberation of negativity and obscuration through enactment of the hundredfold homage to the sacred, enlightened families. I respectfully bow down to Samantabhadra and Mahotara, to the assembly of peaceful and wrathful deities, and to the assembly of the 100 sacred enlightened families. Having purified all negativity and obscurations, may I act so as to guide all beings to the pure Buddha fields. I now present this natural liberation of negativity and obscuration through enactment of the hundredfold homage, a method for performing a hundredfold homage to the infinite, peaceful, and wrathful deities of the 100 sacred enlightened families, by which negativity and obscuration may be purified. Cherish your zeal in this practice throughout the 3 times. Namo. I bow down to Samantabhadra, the Buddha body of reality. Father of all Buddhas, the natural purity of mental consciousness, the primary Buddha, unchanging body of light, sky blue, and seated in the posture of meditative equipoise. I bow down to Samantabhadri, the supreme consort, natural purity of the sensory spectrum of phenomena. Stainless white like crystal, mother of all Buddhas of past, present, and future, joyously embracing her consort in supreme bliss. I bow down to Vairochana, manifestation of supreme Buddha body, the natural purity of the aggregate of form, pure without renunciation of delusion, conch white, holding a wheel and a bell, seated on an exalted throne supported by lions, the resplendent, pristine cognition of reality's expanse. I bow down to Vajrasattva, manifestation of supreme Buddha mind, the natural purity of the aggregate of consciousness, pure without renunciation of aversion, azure blue, holding a vajra and a bell, seated on an exalted throne supported by elephants, the resplendent, mirror-like, pristine cognition. I bow down to Ratna Sambhava, manifestation of supreme Buddha attributes, the natural purity of the aggregate of feeling, pure without renunciation of pride, golden yellow, holding a jewel and a bell, seated on an exalted throne supported by horses, the resplendent, pristine cognition of sameness. I bow down to Amitabha, manifestation of supreme Buddha speech, the natural purity of the aggregate of perceptions, pure without renunciation of attachment. Copper red, holding a lotus and a bell, seated on an exalted throne supported by peacocks, the resplendent, pristine cognition of discernment. I bow down to Amoghasiddhi, manifestation of supreme Buddha activities, the natural purity of the aggregate of motivational tendencies, pure without renunciation of envy. Turquoise green, holding a crossed vajra and a bell, seated on an exalted throne supported by Chikvaka birds, the resplendent, pristine cognition of accomplishment. I bow down to Datvishvari, the supreme consort, the mother of the Buddha family, natural purity of space, moon-like white, holding a wheel and a bell, joyously embracing her consort in supreme bliss. I bow down to Buddha Lochana, the supreme consort, the mother of the Vajra family, natural purity of earth, beryl blue, holding a vajra and a bell, joyously embracing her consort in supreme bliss. I bow down to Mamaki, the supreme consort, the mother of the Ratna family, natural purity of water, minium orange, holding a jewel and a bell, joyously embracing her consort in supreme bliss. I bow down to Pandaravashini, the supreme consort, the mother of the Padma family, natural purity of fire, fire crystal red, holding a lotus and a bell, joyously embracing her consort in supreme bliss. I bow down to Samayatara, the supreme consort, the mother of the Karma family, natural purity of wind, sapphire green, holding a crossed Vajra and a bell, joyously embracing her consort in supreme bliss. I bow down to Kshitigarbha, male bodhisattva who acts for the benefit of beings, the natural purity of visual consciousness, transcendent of renunciation, snow mountain white, holding a seedling and a bell. I bow down to Maitreya, male bodhisattva who acts for the benefit of beings, the natural purity of auditory consciousness, transcendent of renunciation, cloud white, holding a blossoming orange bush and a bell. I bow down to Samantabhadra, male bodhisattva who acts for the benefit of beings, the natural purity of olfactory consciousness, transcendent of renunciation, amber yellow, holding a grain sheath and a bell. I bow down to Akashagarbha, male bodhisattva who acts for the benefit of beings, the natural purity of gustatory consciousness, transcendent of renunciation, burnished golden yellow, holding a sword and a bell. I bow down to Avalokiteshvara, male bodhisattva who acts for the benefit of beings, the natural purity of tactile consciousness, transcendent of renunciation, coral red, holding a lotus and a bell. I bow down to Manju Sri Kumarabhuta, male bodhisattva who acts for the benefit of beings, the natural purity of mental consciousness, transcendent of renunciation, minium orange, holding a lily and a bell. I bow down to Nivarana Vishkambin, male bodhisattva who acts for the benefit of beings, the natural purity of the ground of all consciousness, transcendent of renunciation, green as the night-flowering lotus, holding a book and a bell. I bow down to Vajrapani, male bodhisattva who acts for the benefit of beings, the natural purity of defiled consciousness, transcendent of renunciation, emerald green, holding a Vajra and a bell. I bow down to White Lasya, female bodhisattva whose offerings delight, the eyes of all, those gone to bliss, past, present, and future, the natural purity of visual phenomena, transcendent of renunciation, quartz white, holding a mirror and a bell. I bow down to White Pushpa, female bodhisattva whose offerings delight the minds of all, those gone to bliss, past, present, and future. The natural purity of past conceptual thoughts, transcendent of renunciation, pearl white, holding a white lotus and a bell. I bow down to Yellow Malya, female bodhisattva, whose gestures delight the minds of all those gone to bliss, past, present, and future. The natural purity of indeterminate conceptual thoughts, transcendent of renunciation, saffron yellow, holding a garland and a bell. I bow down to Yellow Dupa, female bodhisattva, whose offerings delight the noses of all those gone to bliss, past, present, and future. The natural purity of fragrance, transcendent of renunciation, golden yellow in color, holding sweet-smelling incense and a censer. I bow down to Red Gita, female bodhisattva, whose offerings delight the ears of all those gone to bliss, past, present, and future. The natural purity of sound, transcendent of renunciation, marshmallow pink and playing a lute. I bow down to Red Aloka, female bodhisattva, whose offerings delight the eyes of all those gone to bliss, past, present, and future. the natural purity of future conceptual thoughts, transcendent of renunciation, lotus pink, and holding a glowing butter lamp. I bow down to green Ganda, female bodhisattva whose offerings delight the bodies of all those gone to bliss, past, present, and future. The natural purity of present conceptual thoughts, transcendent of renunciation, poppy green, holding a perfume-filled conch. I bow down to green Nati, female bodhisattva whose offerings delight the tongues of all those gone to bliss, past, present, and future. The natural purity of taste, transcendent of renunciation, marine green, holding a deliciously nutritious food offering. I bow down to Trilokya Vijaya, male gatekeeper whose wrathful presence guards against obstacles at the eastern gate, the natural purity of eternalist views, transcendent of renunciation, white, holding a cudgel and a bell. I bow down to Yamantaka, male gatekeeper whose wrathful presence guards against obstacles at the southern gate, the natural purity of nihilistic views, transcendent of renunciation, yellow, holding a skull club and a bell. I bow down to Hayagriva Raja, male gatekeeper whose wrathful presence guards against obstacles at the western gate, the natural purity of egotistical views, transcendent of renunciation, red, holding an iron chain and a bell. I bow down to Amrita Kundalin, male gatekeeper whose wrathful presence guards against obstacles at the northern gate, the natural purity of substantialist views, transcendent of renunciation, green, holding a crossed Vajra and a bell. I bow down to Vajrankusha, female gatekeeper, whose immeasurable compassion guides the 6 classes of beings away from their mundane realms. White, holding an iron hook that attracts, she embraces her wrathful consort in blissful union. I bow down to Vajra Pasha, female gatekeeper, whose immeasurable loving kindness acts ceaselessly on behalf of beings, yellow, holding a noose that lassos. She embraces her wrathful consort in blissful union. I bow down to Vajraspota, female gatekeeper whose immeasurable sympathetic joy embraces each and every living being. Red, holding an iron chain that binds, she embraces her wrathful consort in blissful union. I bow down to Vajraganta, female gatekeeper whose immeasurable equanimity transcends discrimination between living beings. Green, holding a bell that summons, she embraces her wrathful consort in blissful union. I bow down to Indra Chakra, sage whose emanational Buddha form acts ceaselessly on behalf of beings, the natural purity of pride and guide of the god realms, white and holding a lute. I bow down to Vemachitra, sage whose emanational Buddha form acts ceaselessly on behalf of beings, the natural purity of envy and guide of the anti-god realms, green, holding armor and a weapon. I bow down to Sakyamuni, sage whose emanational Buddha form acts ceaselessly on behalf of beings, the natural purity of attachment and guide of the human realms, yellow, holding a begging bowl and staff. I bow down to Stira Simha, sage whose emanational Buddha form acts ceaselessly on behalf of beings, the natural purity of delusion and guide of the animal realms, blue and holding a book. I bow down to the transcendent Jvalamukha, sage whose emanational Buddha form acts ceaselessly on behalf of beings, the natural purity of miserliness and guide of the anguished spirit realms, red, and holding a bejeweled casket. I bow down to Dharmaraja, sage whose emanational Buddha form acts ceaselessly on behalf of beings, the natural purity of aversion and guide of the hell realms. Black and holding a warming flame and cooling water. I bow down to Mahotara Heruka, who has 3 faces, dark brown, white and red, and 6 arms. A Vajra, Katvanga, and small drum in his right hands, and a bell, blood-filled skull, and noose of entrails in his left. I bow down to Buddha Heruka, who has 3 faces, dark brown, white, and red, and 6 arms. A wheel, axe, and sword in his right hands, and a bell, plowshare, and blood-filled skull in his left. I bow down to Vajra Heruka, who has 3 faces, dark blue, white, and red, and 6 arms. A Vajra, blood-filled skull, and axe in his right hands, and a bell, blood-filled skull, and plowshare in his left. I bow down to Ratna Heruka, who has 3 faces, dark yellow, white, and red, and 6 arms. A jewel, katvanga, and mace in his right hands, and a bell, blood-filled skull, and trident in his left. I bow down to Padma Heruka, who has 3 faces, dark red, white, and blue, and 6 arms. A lotus, katvanga, and cudgel in his right hands, and a bell, blood-filled skull, and small drum in his left. I bow down to Karma Heruka, who has 3 faces, dark green, white, and red, and 6 arms. A sword, katvanga, and cudgel in his right hands, and a bell, blood-filled skull, and plowshare in his left. I bow down to Krodeshvari, wrathful queen of reality's expanse, dark blue, holding a vajra, offering a blood-filled skull to her consort's mouth. She joyously embraces him in supreme bliss. I bow down to Buddha Krodeshvari, the Buddha queen of reality's expanse, red-brown, holding a wheel, offering a blood-filled skull to her consort's mouth. She joyously embraces him in supreme bliss. I bow down to Vajra Krodeshvari, Vajra queen of reality's expanse, pale blue, holding a vajra, offering a blood-filled skull to her consort's mouth. She joyously embraces him in supreme bliss. I bow down to Ratna Krodeshvari, Ratna queen of reality's expanse, pale yellow, holding a jewel, offering a blood-filled skull to her consort's mouth. She joyously embraces him in supreme bliss. I bow down to Padma Krodeshvari, Padma queen of reality's expanse, pale red, holding a lotus, offering a blood-filled skull to her consort's mouth. She joyously embraces him in supreme bliss. I bow down to Karma Krodeshvari, Karma queen of reality's expanse, pale green, holding a crossed vajra, offering a blood-filled skull to her consort's mouth. She joyously embraces him in supreme bliss. I bow down to Gauri of the eastern direction, acting on behalf of living beings as one of the Matara, wrathful, white, and aloof on her throne of human corpses, brandishing a human corpse as a cudgel to destroy the conceptual landscape of cyclic existence. I bow down to Chauri of the southern direction, acting on behalf of living beings as one of the Matara, wrathful, yellow, and aloof on her throne of human corpses, shooting an arrow from a bow to bind into visibly skillful means and discriminative awareness. I bow down to Pramoha of the western direction, acting on behalf of living beings as one of the Matara, wrathful, red, and aloof on her throne of human corpses, holding a crocodile victory banner to resist the seductions of cyclic existence. I bow down to Wylie of the northern direction, acting on behalf of living beings as one of the Matara, wrathful, black, and aloof on her throne of human corpses, holding a Vajra and a blood-filled skull to sustain recognition of the unchanging reality. I bow down to Pukasi of the southeastern direction, acting on behalf of living beings as one of the Matara, wrathful, red-yellow, and aloof on her throne of human corpses, clutching and devouring entrails to draw sentient beings free from the dissonant realms. I bow down to Gasmari of the southwestern direction, acting on behalf of living beings as one of the Matara, wrathful, green-black, and aloof on her throne of human corpses, drinking blood from a skull to consume the turning circle of cyclic existence. I bow down to Chandali of the northwestern direction, acting on behalf of living beings as one of the Matara, wrathful, pale yellow, and aloof on her throne of human corpses, tearing apart the head and body of a bloated corpse to sever erroneous thoughts at their roots. I bow down to Smashani of the northeastern direction, acting on behalf of living beings as one of the Matara, wrathful, blue-black, and aloof on her throne of human corpses, tearing apart the head from a human corpse to sever the buttresses of cyclic existence. I bow down to brown-black, lion-headed Simhamukhi, acting on behalf of living beings in the form of a Pishachi, carrying a corpse in her mouth and shaking her mane to stir cyclic existence to its depths. I bow down to red, tiger-headed Vyagrimukhi, acting on behalf of living beings in the form of a Pishachi, with her two arms crossed and staring with bulging eyes to overwhelm attachment to cyclic existence. I bow down to black, fox-headed Srigalamukhi, acting on behalf of living beings in the form of a Pishachi, brandishing a razor and devouring lungs and a heart to purify dissonant mental states in their basic nature. I bow down to blue-black, wolf-headed Svanamukhi, acting on behalf of living beings in the form of a Pishachi, tearing apart a corpse and staring with bulging eyes to stir the pit of cyclic existence. I bow down to white-yellow, vulture-headed Gridramukhi, acting on behalf of living beings in the form of a Pishachi, clawing a bloated corpse and extracting the entrails to sever the three poisons from their roots. I bow down to red-black, kite-headed Kankamukhi, acting on behalf of living beings in the form of a Pishachi, carrying a bloated corpse draped over her shoulder to extract beings from the pit of cyclic existence. I bow down to black, crow-headed Kakamukhi, acting on behalf of living beings in the form of a Pishachi, brandishing a sword and drinking blood from a skull to consume and liberate dissonant mental states. I bow down to blue-black, owl-headed Ulukamukhi, acting on behalf of living beings in the form of a Pishachi, holding an iron hook and carrying a blood-filled skull to draw beings free from the false mentality of cyclic existence. I bow down to horse-headed Ankusha at the eastern gate, acting on behalf of living beings in the form of a female gatekeeper, horse-headed, white, and holding an iron hook, the force of her immeasurable compassion, guiding those trapped in cyclic existence away from the lower realms. I bow down to sow-headed Pasha at the southern gate, acting on behalf of living beings in the form of a female gatekeeper, sow-headed, yellow, and holding a noose, the force of her immeasurable loving kindness, constricting the false mentality of beings. I bow down to lion-headed Sportar at the western gate, acting on behalf of living beings in the form of a female gatekeeper. Lion-headed, red, and holding an iron chain, the force of her immeasurable sympathetic joy shackling the dissonant mental states generated by ignorance. I bow down to snake-headed Ganta at the northern gate, acting on behalf of living beings in the form of a female gatekeeper, snake-headed, green, and holding a bell. The force of her immeasurable equanimity, subduing the cognitive resonances of the 5 poisons. I bow down to the projectress who casts a noose, manifestation of the natural purity of reality. Clothed in flayed hides, she unites the 3 levels of existence with the pure Buddha fields, however these may manifest, and casts her noose of solar rays, projecting beings of the trichiliocosm into higher rebirths. I bow down to the projectress who casts a pike. Holding a blood-filled skull and casting a pike, she purifies the 5 dissonant mental states to dispel permanently the diseases of conceptual thought. The force of her compassion, rich in skillful means, projecting human beings into higher rebirths. I bow down to the projectress who rings a bell, holding to her heart a blood-filled skull. She subjugates the entire trichiliocosm to secure ignorant sentient beings in reality's expanse, the resonance of her charisma projecting beings of the trichiliocosm into higher births. I bow down to the projectress who carries a Garuda, her body an exquisite white-yellow, signifying her proficiency in the rites of pacification and enrichment. Holding to her heart a blood-filled skull to overpower the 5 sensory desires, she carries a Vajra and a large Garuda, projecting the gods into higher rebirths. I bow down to the projectress who casts a shooting star, her awesome body an exquisite blue-black, holding a Vajra and casting a shooting star to avert the intensity of the great battle. She drinks blood from a skull, projecting the anti-gods into higher rebirths. I bow down to the projectress who holds a thunderbolt garland, her body part red and part black, signifying proficiency in the rites of subjugation and wrath. Her facial expression fixed in domination. To purify and ease outer and inner obscurations, she wields a Vajra and thunderbolt garland, projecting anguished spirits into higher rebirths. I bow down to the projectress who wields an eagle-feathered banner, her body part white and part black, signifying her proficiency in the rites of pacification and wrath, drinking blood from a skull to dissolve delusion into emptiness. She holds a Vajra and wields an eagle-feathered banner, projecting animals into higher rebirths. I bow down to the projectress who holds a sword, her body part yellow and part black, signifying her proficiency in the rites of enrichment and wrath, drinking blood from a skull to dissolve the hells into emptiness. She holds a Vajra and a sword, projecting the hell beings into higher rebirths. I bow down to yak-headed Manoraksashi, the brownish-white yogini holding a Vajra and skull. I bow down to snake-headed Brahmani, the yellowish-white yogini holding a Vajra and lotus. I bow down to leopard-headed Raudri, the greenish-white yogini, holding a Vajra and trident. I bow down to weasel-headed Vaishnavi, the bluish-white yogini, holding a Vajra and wheel. I bow down to brown bear-headed Kaumari, the reddish-white yogini, holding a Vajra and pike. I bow down to black, bare-headed Indrani, the white yogini holding a vajra and noose of entrails. I bow down to bat-headed Vajra, the yellow yogini, holding a jewel and razor. I bow down to crocodile-headed Santi, the reddish-yellow yogini, holding a jewel and vase. I bow down to scorpion-headed Amrita, the reddish-yellow yogini, holding a jewel and lotus. I bow down to hawk-headed Saumi, the whitish-yellow yogini, holding a jewel and vajra. I bow down to fox-headed Dandi, the greenish-yellow yogini, holding a jewel and cudgel. I bow down to tiger-headed Rakshasi, the blackish-yellow yogini, holding a jewel and blood-filled skull. I bow down to vulture-headed Bhakshasi, the greenish-red yogini, holding a lotus and club. I bow down to horse-headed Rati, the red yogini, holding a lotus and human torso. I bow down to Garuda-headed Rudrimadi, the pale red yogini, holding a lotus and cudgel. I bow down to dog-headed Ekacharini, the red yogini, holding a lotus and vajra. I bow down to hoopoe-headed Manoharika, the red yogini, holding a lotus and a bow and arrow. I bow down to deer-headed Siddhikari, the greenish-red yogini, holding a lotus and vase. I bow down to wolf-headed Vayudevi, the bluish-green yogini, holding a crossed vajra and ensign. I bow down to ibex-headed Agnayi, the reddish-green yogini, holding a crossed vajra and firebrand. I bow down to sow-headed Varahi, the blackish-green yogini, holding a crossed vajra and a noose of fangs. I bow down to crow-headed Chamundi, the reddish-green yogini, holding a crossed vajra and an infant corpse. I bow down to elephant-headed Bhujana, the blackish-green yogini, holding a crossed vajra and a bloated corpse. I bow down to snake-headed Varunani, the bluish-green yogini, holding a crossed vajra and a noose of snakes. I bow down to cuckoo-headed Vajra Mahakali, the white gatekeeper, holding a vajra and iron hook. I bow down to goat-headed Vajra Mahachagala, the yellow gatekeeper, holding a jewel and a noose. I bow down to lion-headed Vajra Mahakumbhakani, the red gatekeeper, holding a lotus and an iron chain. I bow down to snake-headed Vajra, Lambodara, the blackish-green gatekeeper, holding a crossed vajra and a bell. While reciting this prayer, all the male and female yogins present should remove their outer garments, and as they make successive full-length prostrations, they should respectfully pay homage to the deities. While respectfully narrating this eulogy in a melodious voice, and enacting the 100-fold homage, one should mentally admit and feel remorse for all one's negativities and obscurations which have been, are being, and will be accumulated. This natural liberation of negativity and obscuration is an extraordinary method for purifying obscurations by enacting in full the 110 homages to the peaceful and wrathful deities. Whatever other confessional practices one may generally undertake, such as the reparation and confession of the hells, the merits accrued by one who practices in this manner are immeasurable. Therefore, one should persevere diligently with the enactment of this 100-fold homage. May the influence of this natural liberation of negativity and obscuration through enactment of the 100-fold homage to the 100 sacred enlightened families of the peaceful and wrathful deities not be exhausted until cyclic existence has been emptied. This most profound teaching is an ancillary chapter of the Liberation by Hearing in the Intermediate States, a supporting text to the Reparation and Confession of the Hells, and a synopsis of the 3 editions, long, medium, and short, of the Peaceful and Wrathful Deities, the Ritual Purification, entitled Natural Liberation of Feelings. It should be propagated everywhere, and enacted energetically at all times, without interruption.